A very warm welcome to all the participants of this webinar. I am Dr. Vishwas Madan. I am an MDS in Periodontics practicing at Navi Mumbai since 2016. So the topic at hand for today is soft tissue management in implant dentistry, a very interesting topic and very rightfully so because of the increasing aesthetic demands of our patients. So let's delve into the agenda for this webinar. Will be to see the differences between the peri-implant and the periodontal tissues, some surgical soft tissue considerations, that is evaluation and pre-implant planning, some modification in the surgical procedure which will help us to obtain a much better aesthetic outcome and a longer aesthetic outcome, some augmentation techniques which will look at to increase the width of the keratinized tissue and to increase the biological biotype. Also, we will briefly mention the non-surgical approach to soft tissue management. So let's start. In the implants contain a dense network of collagen fibers which are basically parallel from starting from the alveolar crest to the gingiva, in contrast to a tooth where the fibers are basically perpendicular. Fiber to metal surface contact has not been observed in the case of an implant, and hence the length of the supraalveolar connective tissue in implant is also significantly larger than that of the tooth. Despite the fact that periodontitis and peri-implantitis develop similarly, the dynamics of this process could be completely different because the periodontitis lesion is walled off by the intact supracrestal connective tissue. The penetration of the infiltrates into the bone marrow is generally not evident. However, because the peri-implantitis lesion progresses without the presence of connective tissue compartment, it often progresses rapidly into the bone marrow, leading to severe bone loss in the case of implants. Now it becomes more necessary to have a healthy, well keratinized attached tissue adjacent to the implant. So let's see how we can do that. When a patient walks into our clinics, we need to evaluate the patient. We definitely evaluate in the terms of having a CBCT to check the bone, to check the site, the occlusion and all the other factors, but often I have seen dentists not checking the soft tissues. So the contour of the ridge along the width and the height can be visually inspected and carefully palpated, but it is very important also to evaluate the quality and the quantity of the soft tissue in the site where we are going to place the implant. So the quality of the keratinized tissue, it's very important because it provides a fibrous collar that surrounds the implant and seals off the bacteria from the depth of the peri-implant sulcus. This allows for easier plaque control for the patient and less chances of peri-implantitis with better aesthetics, of course. It is said that a minimum of 2 millimeters of keratinized tissue is required, 1 mm buccal and 1 mm lingual, but we all know more the merrier. Also, we should be evaluating some soft tissue defects like a sinus tract, a recession or some frenum attachments, as we can see in this case. Now, Palachi and Erickson have given a very beautiful classification system which divides the implant site into 4 classes depending on the vertical and horizontal dimension of the tissue. We have a lot of classification of on bone, but this is one of the good classification on soft tissue, where vertical loss and horizontal loss can be calibrated as class 1 to class 4, class 1 being intact or slightly reduced papillae and class A in horizontal loss being intact or slightly reduced buccal tissues, and going up to class D, which can be extreme loss of buccal tissue. Now we have come to understand that the existing periodontal tissue biotype plays a very important role when planning for any implant procedure. Hence, Linde has subdivided the periodontal tissue into 2 types, a thin and scalloped and thick and flat. The periodontal biotype renders its own characteristic to the final surgical outcome. The clinician should take the periodontal biotype into consideration when choosing a certain treatment modality, because a thick periodontal biotype is typically more forgiving of any surgical procedure compared to a thin biotype. So we see the influence of mucosal thickness on the soft tissue integration. A minimum of 3 mm of peri-implant mucosa is required for a stable epithelial connective tissue attachment to form. So the thickness from the bone crest to the gingival margin This is the thickness which I am talking about. Mucosal thickness should be minimum of 3 millimeters. If a minimal dimension of gingival tissue is not available, bone loss may occur to ensure the proper development of biological width. How do we check this? We can use a reamer with a stopper, and we can penetrate the reamer from the external surface of the mucosa to the point where a bony resistance is felt, and we can check after giving LA what is the thickness of this soft tissue. Now we come to pre-implant planning for the aesthetic zone. 3D implant positioning is very much essential to achieve a good result. When placing an implant in the aesthetic zone, there are some rules which must be followed for a better aesthetic outcome. To prevent any facial gingival recession, which can be deadly for a patient. Imagine a patient coming into your practice, about 30-35 years old female with a high smile line, and if you do not position the implant properly, if you don't evaluate the soft tissues, don't check the gingival biotype, then really it can land you up in a big trouble. So a pre-implant planning becomes very important. Buccolingually, the implant should be positioned 2 millimeters palatal to the imaginary line joining the outer curvatures of the tooth. So this is the line. The implant, external surface of the implant should be minimum 2 millimeters palatal to this line. Then we see the apicocorneal distance should be at least 3 millimeters from the free gingival margin. Sorry for that. And mesiodistally, the implant should be 1.5 mm away from the adjacent tooth, and 3 millimeters distance should be there in case of two implants placed together. Now classically, soft tissue topography is determined by parameters such as contact point position and crown dimensions. Salama in 1990s has found that 4.5 mm of papilla was the average amount of papilla that we should expect to have between an implant and a tooth if a distance of 1.5 mm is maintained between them. But to have that papilla, we need to have our contact point, and the distance between the contact point and the alveolar crest should not exceed 4.5 millimeters. This distance further reduces to 3.4 millimeters when it's the case between two implants. When we want to construct a papilla in between two implants, we definitely need to place two implants at a distance of 3 mm from each other. And Tarnow in 2003 has said that in most cases an average of 3.4 mm soft tissue height can be expected to form over the implant crest of bone when this distance is maintained. Now unavoidable bone resorption also can occur when the tooth is extracted, and there are some protocols published to decrease this amount of soft tissue loss by performing a connective tissue graft at the time of immediate implant, or newer techniques like socket shield can be taken up to preserve the buccal contours of the tissues as advised by Dr. Howard Gluckman. Now what is soft tissue preservation and soft tissue augmentation? Preservation is before even extracting the tooth, we can do some things which will help the soft tissue to get preserved. We will not lose that soft tissue which is nicely surrounding that tooth, because mostly we lose the tissue when the tooth is extracted. So we should always aim at preserving. But if the tooth has already been lost and the patient is coming to you after the tooth extraction has been performed, then augmentation should be done and can be done. So it can be soft tissue preservation augmentation can be performed at different stages of implant therapy. It can be executed either before the extraction of the tooth, or before the implant placement on a healed ridge, or at stage 2 implant surgery. Now it is said that absence of attached gingiva less than 3 millimeters at an edentulous implant site, you should perform grafting 8 to 12 weeks before you place the implant. Remember, you should perform the grafting before you place the implant. And if adequate gingival tissue which is more than 3 mm is present, then gingival grafting can be performed either at the second stage, or it can be performed simultaneously with the implant placement. Now how we can preserve the soft tissue? There are some post-extraction or pre-extraction treatment modalities which can be adopted, like ridge preservation, socket preservation, putting immediate implants, doing a socket shield, and also orthodontic extrusion before the tooth extraction to maintain that bone and soft tissue volume. our thought process has evolved from simply augmenting the tissue to a concept where preservation of tissue is given equal importance. We now understand that the peri-implant soft tissue management starts at the time of tooth extraction, not following the placement. We have thus moved away from the earlier concepts of socket compression following extraction, which was very commonly taught to us in colleges. This fundamental change in our philosophy has been fueled by the appreciation of the fact that socket preservation, whenever appropriate, with subsequent temporization with an ovate Pontic done after the tooth extraction, plays an important role in preserving that soft tissue, especially the papilla heights. Using of an incision design such as a papilla preservation flap further helps to preserve any existing tissue. We will look at the modified flap designs and the suturing techniques, and also we will look at the augmentation of the keratinized mucosa by increasing the width of the keratinized tissue and increasing the gingival thickness. So I would like to give credits to my mentor, Dr. Ziv Simon, whom I had interacted in the May of 2019, and through his experience and wisdom I have gained a lot of knowledge in modification of surgical procedure, which you can apply in your practices to gain a better aesthetic profile for your implant cases. So what are the modifications in surgical procedure? They can be divided as excisional techniques or incisional techniques without tissue transfer, and incisional techniques with tissue transfer. We will come to detail of this. Now, when based on the amount of fixed mucosa, we can decide which technique we want to do. When the fixed mucosa is more than 4 mm, then I would prefer to do an excisional technique, or when a fixed mucosa is between 1 mm to 4 mm, then I would prefer to do an incisional technique. And when too little mucosa is present before the implant surgery, I would rather do a Fresnel graft or some augmentation technique with maybe a connective tissue graft preceding the incisional technique as well. So what are the excisional techniques which we have? We can utilize a punch approach. This type of flap design for implant placement is used only in cases where the tissue quality is good, with a minimum of 4 mm of attached tissue. Here you can see it's much more than 4 millimeters. To attain a precise placement of the punch of the implant placement, it is a must to use a surgical guide when using a punch approach, because the visibility and accessibility is very less. This is the simplest type of flap design without raising any soft tissue. Then there is a half punch approach. This flap design is used in cases where the buccal tissue is not sufficient or it is deficient, but this technique makes visibility very restricted and it is really not advised to use it without a guide. Now then we have the eye incision technique. So this is an incision technique where we place a labial horizontal incision 0.5 millimeters away from the implant and a vertical middle incision on the implant, and then we can raise the flap and place our gingival formers to help get a good papilla. Then we have a palatal or a lingual crestal design. This is a flap design is used in cases where the buccal tissue is deficient. The incision is given towards the lingual or the palatal side of the arch, and the flap is raised towards the buccal side. The next design which we have is a mesial papilla preservation type flap. This type of flap design is used where there is need to preserve the mesial papilla to maintain the aesthetics in certain cases. Here the mesial papilla is preserved by using a vertical releasing incision connected to the crestal incision and an intracircular incision on the distal tooth, which will preserve the mesial papilla. Then we have a double papilla preservation design. This type of flap design is used to preserve both the mesial and the distal papillae. Both these are preserved even in the punch type flap, but when you want to mobilize the tissue for better visibility or augmenting this tissue, then you need to raise a flap, which is not possible in a punch technique. It will give a good amount of uncovering a good amount of tissue and mobilize the tissue on the buccal aspect. Here two vertical releasing incisions are given and they are connected with the lingual or a palatal crestal incision, which will let you raise the flap towards the buccal aspect. Then we have a modified double papilla preservation flap such as this, where it can help form a papilla between the two dental implants. So whenever there is a procedure in the we are placing two adjacent dental implants in the aesthetic zone, we can make use of this kind of incision design, which maintains this thick tissue in between the two implants, which will further help us to have a good papilla. The next one is an interproximal papillary reconstruction in maxillary implants. We have this technique where we can use a U-shaped incision which is open toward the buccal aspect. It is similar to a double papilla preservation design, but now it is the incisions are a little wider to give more blood supply, and the flap would be split in the center into a mesial and distal halves. In between it can be split, and then the former can be attached in between that split, and then these small edges can be sutured to the palatal aspect. Then we have the Mish et al.'s split finger technique. It comprises of a circular incision made 2 to 3 mm to the palatal side from each tooth, with a loop design at least 2 to 2.5 millimeters adjacent to the implant location. So this is a loop design here. The incision would be joined facially by a semicircular incision at the pre-planned tissue margin, as has been done here. The facial fingers are elevated to the desired inter-implant height for the papillae, and then the palatal fingers would be split and they would be joined in between. So they are joined here and then here. So this gives a good, once it is sutured with a vertical mattress suture, it gives a very good papilla height. Then we have the Palachi and Nozari technique. It's a very popular technique to restore the papilla-like tissue around the implants. It comprises of a full thickness flap that would be elevated and reflected labially. The healing abutments would then be placed, and the semilunar beveled incisions would be made, recreating the scalloping of the tissues which is similar to the natural teeth. Later, these pedicles can be rotated to fill the inter-abutment tooth spaces. So these pedicles can be rotated and filled in between the two implants and in between the tooth and the implant. Then we have the M-shaped flap design. This technique consisted of an intracircular inner beveled incision which would be performed around the distal aspect of the adjacent teeth, rounding buccally and palatally, and connected with the M incision. So this forms basically a letter M, and again small flap is raised. This raised flap can be nicely accommodate a good gingival former of appropriate width and height. A monofilament suture is preferred here. We will talk about the sutures in the next part. Then we have the pouch and roll technique. This is a very good technique which you can use to bulk up the buccal tissue. This technique is simple, versatile for mild to moderate ridge deficiency. It thickens the soft tissue around the implant. So in this we raise a mini pedicle flap on the buccal side, 1 mm wider than the diameter of the implant platform. It is de-epithelialized and it then is rolled in the form of a mini pedicle underneath this buccal pouch. So you can see very nicely buccal contour is pumped up. Now coming to surgical approaches for soft tissue management. Surgical approach to augment the width of the deficient mucosa are usually performed prior to implant placement or when undesired exposure of submerged implant occurs. What are the principles of augmenting the tissue? The first principle is that the recipient site must provide for graft vascularization. Second principle is that the recipient site must provide a means for rigid immobilization of the graft tissue, so it is done by various suturing techniques. Third principle is adequate hemostasis must be obtained at the recipient site. Fourth principle is that the donor tissue must be large enough and also it must be thick enough to facilitate the immobilization and to take advantage of the peripheral circulation. What are the factors influencing the successful augmentation? Basically a periodontal tissue biotype, as we talked earlier in the presentation about a thicker periodontal biotype providing a better chance of success. A flap passivity prior to closure, and suturing technique and post-operative maintenance by the patient. So use of silk sutures here is usually not recommended for soft tissue graft procedures, since the silk sutures tend to have a weakening effect and often seem to show a mild inflammatory response during the initial healing process. The preferred suture type for tissue augmentation is a suture such as Vicryl or Monocryl 50 or 60, and that too with a round body needle, because usually we use a reverse cutting needle, which is quite traumatic to the grafts. Now come to the first approach to soft tissue augmentation, which is a apically positioned flap. It has been documented as the most successful method to increase the width of keratinized mucosa. A mid-crestal incision preserving the connective tissue available on the lingual side is suggested in order to elevate a double layer flap. The inner layer of the flap is then sutured back, thus protecting the bone and allowing a recipient bed, and the outer layer is sutured below the into the muscle attachment here. Now this recipient side, which is left, can be left raw, or can be covered with a periodontal pack, or it can also be covered with a free gingival graft, as we will see in the next slide. So here the procedure is almost similar as an apically positioned flap, but the free gingival graft has been placed on that recipient bed, and it's a very preferred treatment option because it provides a good thick band of keratinized tissue after healing. Now we come to a case of free gingival graft which we have done in our clinic. Here we can see that this particular area, there is a high frenal attachment on the buccal aspect, and we can see that the tissue is deficient. Here now we prepare the recipient bed. It is prepared by using raising a split thickness flap and undermining that flap, and we can see a nice vascular recipient bed, which was the first principle to our soft tissue augmentation. The next step is to harvest a large enough adequate thickness free gingival graft. So we have taken the graft from the same side, left side of the palate, and then we have sutured it with cross mattress suture. This is nothing but Abgel, which is placed to control the bleeding, and then the free gingival graft is nicely immobilized, which was the second point. Immobilization should be very precise. We have used rapid Vicryl 50 sutures here to immobilize and adapt the graft. One of the sutures used here is a sling suture around the gingival former, which compresses tightly the graft against the recipient bed and achieves good peripheral circulation from the recipient bed. After healing, this is just 5 days after healing, which we can see here, and even the site after 5 days of the palatal site also appears well healed. And this is after 2 months, where we can see a thick band of keratinized tissue. This is a problem with free gingival grafts, where the color does not match with the adjacent tissue, but this was okay with this patient, and then we can restore it successfully. Then we come to the next approach, which is using a subepithelial connective tissue graft. Now this was first taught by Kalana, and SCTG procedures have been used successfully throughout the years since then for the management of recession and soft tissue defects around natural tooth, but they can also be utilized for augmenting the soft tissue when we are placing the implants or before we are placing the implants. So there are two techniques basically in this. One is the open technique, where we raise the thickness flap and then we place the connective tissue graft inside and we suture, or we can do it with the closed technique as it is done here using a Vista approach. The graft is pushed into place. When indicated and properly utilized, these surgical procedures can provide stable and significant gain in the soft tissue volume and contour that can contribute to the successful aesthetic management of implant site. Now, SCTG connective tissue graft can be harvested from either the palate or the tuberosity or edentulous sites. This is one case where soft tissue augmentation has been done at the time of extraction. The tooth is extracted, the area is curated nicely. As we can see here, there is no buccal plate, the buccal cortical bone is missing. We have done a vista technique here, undermine that flap. This soft tissue, connective tissue goes inside from here, and then it is sutured nicely. So that's the final suturing. Here we have used Prolene sutures, which are 6-0. Then we have an open technique for doing the same procedure, where we raise the flap, and then this is done adjacent to an implant immediately, and we are placing a connective tissue graft over here. The next modification can be from a rotated palatal strap, a predictable technique that consistently provides a wider zone of keratinized gingiva in the buccal aspect of the future maxillary implant supported restoration. Now this technique consists of a crestal incision that would be given palatal to the implants, and then the flap is raised, and a full thickness flap is raised, and delineating the interdental papillae. All the tissues buccal to the crestal incision would be labally repositioned, and the implant cover screws would later be removed and replaced by healing abutments. So basically this palatal flap is rotated towards the buccal side, and it is sutured, leaving a raw area which heals uneventfully, and this can really help us to maintain a good soft tissue volume on the implant side. Then we have a palatal sliding flap. Two incisions parallel to each other in the buccopalatal direction would be made, the two incisions, and they are extending into the palate, leaving the periosteum intact. Now these pedicles would be disengaged from the palatal side and then can be rotated or slided towards the buccal direction to fill the interproximal space. The very commonly used technique nowadays is a vascularized interpositional connective tissue graft, which can be successfully used for augmenting the buccal and the vertical soft tissue deficiency in the anterior zone. This is a primarily a rotated pedicle flap, a connective tissue graft similar to a connective tissue graft which is harvested, but the anterior edge of the flap, the mesial edge of the connective tissue is not completely incised. It is just rotated onto the apical, onto the coronal and the buccal aspect of the anterior zone. This is a pedicle flap, so it is well vascularized and has a very high chance of success if performed properly. Then we come to the evaluation after the implant is placed and the crowns are placed. How we can evaluate the soft tissue? We can evaluate with the help of a pink aesthetic score. It's an important index for monitoring the peri-implant soft tissue stability in single tooth implants according to different treatment protocols. Now maximum score you can get is of 14, and these areas, there are basically 7 areas which are judged, and the scoring is given from 0 to 1 to 2, 0 being missing, 1 is incomplete, and 2 is complete. So out of 14 we can we can give a score to the aesthetics of that particular area. Now briefly on the non-surgical approaches, we can have lengthening of the contact area, as I spoke about, that the distance between the contact point and the alveolar crest should be approximately 3.8 mm to give the best interdental papilla. Use of a custom tooth form healing abutments. A lot of healing abutments are available. A circular design is not really recommended because it is not in the form of a tooth. So at the level of the CJ of the tooth, where we can see that it's not basically in round form, it's somewhat a triangular form in the anterior aspect and a large oval form in the posterior teeth. We should have custom tooth form healing abutments to give a nice emergence profile. Also, one of the authors recommended repeated scaling and curettage of the interdental papilla region every 15 days for 3 months. So he showed that it would help the papilla to regenerate. Use of a gingival colored porcelain. Of course, we can use the gingival colored porcelain to mask the soft tissue deficiencies. And there are certain implant collar surface characteristics which are coming up now. We can use zirconia abutment, which gives us a better integration of the soft tissue to the abutments. So this was a brief overview of the soft tissue management on the implant side. We have seen that our basically the anatomical peri-implant characteristics, the soft tissue response to the implant material, and the clinical skill of the doctor performing these augmentations will determine the success rate. So it is not just about being better, it's about being different, and you need to give people a reason to choose your business. So I think soft tissue management techniques can be one nice trick up the sleeve of a good clinician, an implant clinician who is looking to have better aesthetics and a long-term aesthetics for his or her patients. So with this, I thank you for attending this webinar. If you have any questions, you can contact me on my phone or you can just drop a mail. I will be happy to respond to you. Thank you.